We have an administration that is a mafia. This is a mafia democracy. Make no mistake about it, because they're operating under their own agenda and they're not expressing the will of the people. They're not. Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody's doing well. All is good on this end. Praise God for that. And I want to thank all of you who continue to subscribe to the channel. We appreciate it very much. We do our best to put content in there that is both informative and entertaining for all of you. A lot of the mob stuff, but a lot of other things too that we try to sneak in there for you because we know you're enjoying it. How do we know that? We get your comments. So thanks a lot. Subscribe. We're approaching some big numbers, and it's thanks to all of you, so we appreciate it. You know, I have been reluctant, I would say, to really delve into politics. And why? Because it's such a dividing conversation all the time. Unfortunately, it is. But you know, there are times when there are certain things that when you're given a platform like I have, you just got to talk about it. And I think today's subject is one of those things. It's in the news constantly. It's not a good thing, but it's something that I've been asked to talk about. Many comments have come in asking me what I thought about what's going on today in the world. So I'm going to delve into that. And obviously, you may know by now, the subject is the war in Ukraine. And let me put it out there, you know, it's a horrible thing. Nobody ever wants to see war. Unfortunately, there's a war going on somewhere in this world, it seems, constantly. But this is a tragic one. It's a big one, and it's terrible. And I want to make this clear for all the people at home here in the United States. I do not want to see the American military on the ground in Ukraine. I don't want us to enter into this war. It would most likely, you know, bring on World War III. None of us want to see that. We are in the nuclear age. We have nuclear weapons. Russia is a nuclear power, as are we. We don't want to see that. It would be devastating, a lot more devastating than what's going on now, and what's going on now is terribly devastating. So I want to make that clear. On the other hand, what's going on there is terrible. Innocent people are being uprooted, being killed. I think over 2 million people have left the country already as refugees. They went into Poland and some of the surrounding countries, and it's horrible for them. And unfortunately, many innocent people have been killed as a result of Russian artillery. It's a horrible thing. We want it to come to an end as soon as possible, obviously. I think it's gone on longer than certainly Putin thought it would go on. He thought this would be in and out. At least that's from everything that we're hearing. It's already tragic in that regard. And let me make this clear. We know what we're being told, what we observe, what we read, what we hear in the media, what we see online. That's the source of information that we have. Now, some of us may have relatives, friends, people in the military, somebody in government, people that can maybe give us a little bit more insight if they're telling the truth. But basically, we have to go on what's in the media and what's out there and what our own observations and thoughts are about certain things. So when I talk about it and give you my perspective today on certain things, I've been asked, Mike, why do you think Putin invaded Ukraine? What are the causes? What do you think about the oil and gas situation going on now? I've been asked a lot of things, so I want to give my perspective. And again, people, you know, it is a political thing. You can't say this is not politics, because when there is a war, it's politics. That's it. And I try not to be divisive. It's not easy not to be divisive because of the situation, because of the, times that we're living in. We're in a very divisive time here in the United States. It's been that way now for the past several years. But my goal is not to be divisive. I would rather be inclusive. I would rather unify the country, unify the world if we possibly could, because that's the best way for humanity to survive in unity. but it becomes difficult. So I have to give my point of view. And many of you know I'm a conservative. Was I a Trump supporter? I want to get this out of the way because I know as I'm sitting here today, even though Trump's not our president and Trump is not involved in the situation right now, people are going to throw rocks at me. Michael, you're a Trump supporter. Why didn't you say something about Trump? You're talking about Biden and the current administration. Well, I'm talking about the current administration because they're the current administration. It's very simple. Trump has nothing to do with this at this point in time. We can't lay anything on him. We can't blame him really for anything. He's out of the picture, and he's not important at this point in time in light of what's going on today in the world. Now, I also want to say this. I'm for the best person. I don't consider myself, I'm not a registered Republican. I am conservative in my ideology and my views. Yes, as far as Trump concerned, I'll get it out of the way. I believed in a lot of his policies. I thought Trump himself was very divisive. I didn't like that about him. He wasn't inclusive. He was divisive. Now, some people that support Trump will say, well, Michael, he had to be because he was constantly on the defense. And, you know, as a New Yorker, I know a lot of times we think the best defense is a good offense. So Trump was always on the defense, and he was always shooting out offense to defend himself. We get it. But he was divisive, bottom line. And I think if he wasn't so divisive, there might have been a different outcome in our presidential election. I want to get that out of the way. It doesn't really pertain to what's going on in today's subject matter, but let me get it out of the way so that if you're commenting on it after you watch this, you know what my feeling is. So let's get back to this. You know, I'm writing a book. I think many of you do. It's called A Mafia Democracy, and it is my perspective on what our current government system is operating like. And I believe it's operating very mob-like, very Machiavellian in its ideology. And I want to point this out to you. You know, everybody, when you hear mafia, what do you think of right away? A group of Italians that are organized criminals, right? That's the mafia. Let me read something to you. The definition of a mafia: a closed group of people in a particular field having a controlling influence. Again, a closed group of people in a particular field having a controlling influence. Well, isn't the government a closed group of people in a particular field they're governing, and they have controlling influence over the entire country? So when I look at the government and say they're operating like the mafia, well, there's the definition, okay? And it's not a good thing. The mafia should not be operating a democracy. But that's what we're seeing. And I'm going to get into that a little bit now and a lot later on. I have a lot to say. You know, I got to tell you, when I was writing the book, I didn't know how to end it because every day what was going on in our government was a new chapter, every single day. And finally, my publisher said, Michael, we got to stop or this book will never end. And he was right. But I can talk about current events now that are not mentioned in the book. There's a lot in the book. And by the way, this is no gimmick. This is real, this is factual, and I think people are going to relate to it and they're going to see it. And the reason I wrote the book was so that people hold our government officials accountable. We have power. When we go into the voting booths, we can vote people in or out. And when people are not doing the right thing or not operating the way our government system should operate, when they're not being honest, when they're lying, we should vote them out of office. That's why I wrote the book, so that people are aware of what's going on and they hold our government officials who really have a major, major impact on all of our lives, hold them accountable. So that's it. So let's get back to Ukraine. Again, horrible, horrible thing that's going on. I wish it never happened. I think all of us do, but here it is. Why did it happen? Now, many of you know this. If you're paying attention, you know this. But from what we're told and from what we understand and from what I think history kind of reveals about Putin, former KGB officer, he was very, very, very upset with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Very upset. He never got over it. And he wants to put it back together. And Ukraine is a neighboring country that was once part of the Soviet Union. Now, some of the rumblings, some of the things that we hear are that Ukraine wanted to become a NATO country. Now, NATO, even though we're not fighting with Russia, they really are, in a way, an enemy of Russia. At least that's how Putin views them. And so when Putin hears that Ukraine is thinking of becoming a NATO country, he's upset. He doesn't want the opposing armies right at his border because Ukraine borders Russia, and if they were a NATO country, well, they would have opposing armies right at his doorstep. So this bothered him. At least that's what we're told. It makes sense. I believe it. Knowing Putin's history, yes, I think so. That's one reason. okay? Primary reason, again, he wants to bring the Soviet Union back. Another reason, I'm going to tell you this, it's plain and simple. If you remember, Putin annexed Crimea when? During the Obama administration. And do you remember what happened? Obama said that would be a red line if Putin went into Crimea, but he did it and nothing happened. Nothing happened. It was a show of weakness on America's part. Cut to what's going on now. Let's talk about Afghanistan. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, no matter what way you cut it, no matter how they try to spin it, it was a disaster for America. It showed tremendous weakness. We left that country. We left our allies there. We left our people behind. We said we would never leave people behind, but we did. 13 members of our military, 13 soldiers were killed, and nothing happened as a result. We left something like $80 billion worth of our equipment, our military equipment behind, that's now in the hands of the Taliban. It was a disaster. And it was a disaster on the world stage, and it showed nothing but weakness on America's part. And you know what? Russia's watching. China is watching. So they say, wow, if this is how they left Afghanistan, if this is what happened when Crimea, and Biden was the vice president at that point in time, if we're going to invade Ukraine, now is the time. They didn't do it during Trump's administration. I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but they didn't do it during the Trump's administration. It's a fact. But as soon as Biden got in, they tested him, and what happened? Another thing, don't think that foreign countries aren't watching what's going on domestically in the United States. Of course they are. They've seen all the unrest here. They see all the division. They see the weak leadership of this administration, and it is weak, people. There's no way to cut it, and there's no way to camouflage it. We have a weak administration right now. So many things are going wrong. The country is in an uproar, okay, over a lot of things. Inflation at an all-time high. Gas prices, which I'll get to, an all-time high. Our southern border, disaster right now. The amount of fentanyl and opioids that are coming through at our southern border in the last year, it's criminal. It's a crime. And the administration responsible for this should be held to account because people are dying as a result. Again, it's for another topic, and I've already mentioned that before, but other countries, our enemies, see what's going on domestically in the United States. They see weakness, they smell blood. And so Putin attacks. Another thing, major issue. Biden comes in his first day of office, cuts out the Keystone Pipeline. Makes it a fact, okay, that he doesn't want any development of fossil fuels here in America. He wants to cut it out. He's pandering to who? To the progressive faction in the Democratic Party that want to see the Green New Deal. They want to kill fossil fuels dead. They don't want it anymore. They've said it, they speak about it, and they've initiated an agenda to do just that. So now we stop being an oil-producing country like we were before. We were energy independent when Biden took office. We didn't have to depend on anybody. We were exporting oil. But now what happens? Russia sees that too. They become the major exporter of oil to Western Europe and even to the United States. Maybe less than 12% of Russian oil comes to the United States, but that's a big number. And from what I understand, that portion of Russian oil being imported into the United States goes to the West Coast. That's what I believe. So when prices rise, because now, as you may have heard, he just sanctioned that because he got so much pressure from even his own party that said, hey, we have an election coming up. We have to do something. Everybody's talking about sanctioning the oil coming out of Russia. Don't buy it anymore. Why? Because Putin is smart. He knew when he invaded Ukraine that the West was going to react. He knew NATO was going to react. And how are they going to react? Sanctions. And they're sanctioning them. They're trying to hurt them financially. And they are, but Putin knew that. So being a major exporter of oil now to Western Europe and even to the United States, that was his money supply. He saw this coming. That was his money supply. We're actually helping him finance the war against Ukraine. You can't cut it any other way. It's the truth. If we're buying oil from Russia, we are helping him finance the operation, the military operation in Ukraine. So now we cut it out. So now what's going to happen here in America? Going to get worse. The prices are going, they went up already yesterday. Prices are going to go up. What is America doing? What is the Biden administration doing? They're blaming Russia. But what they forgot, or they think we forgot, is that prices went up the day he went into office. Within a week, prices started to surge at the pump because he cut out all fossil fuels. He wants to go green. We have politicians telling us to go out and buy electric cars. Like some people earning a mid-level income can go out and spend $50,000 plus on an electric car when they're already paying off their gas engine car. Makes no sense, people. But I'll tell you what they can do. I'll tell you what our government can do. The tax. Now, I know a little bit about gasoline taxes. I'm not going to get into that. I made a living on it at one point in time. But the tax on every gallon of gasoline, the federal tax on every gallon, is 18 cents. If you want to relieve pressure at the pump, put a moratorium on the federal tax. That's 18 cents a gallon. That's significant. Prices will drop the next day. In some states, like California, the tax is higher than that. California state tax is 72 cents a gallon. California doesn't need that. It's, I think, 3 times as high as the average state tax on a gallon of gasoline. Get rid of it. You know how quickly, the pain would be eased here on the West Coast and in California? We're paying close to $6 or $7 a gallon right now, and it's going to go up. Some people are saying it's going to go up to $10 a gallon. $10 a gallon of gas. How can people survive on that? People that have to go to work every day, drive their kids to school, do things that are important in their lives, they have to cut down. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. It'll cost people a couple $100 to fill up their tank. And in California, you don't have a car, you're not going anywhere. Okay, we don't have good public transportation. There's no subway system, nothing like that. You got to drive your car. You're going anywhere. It's terrible. But what is the government doing to help us out in that regard? Nothing. They're blaming Russia and the war on Ukraine. Now let's get back to that. That was the topic, but look, we got to cover a lot of things. Again, for humanitarian reasons, I believe the NATO countries, the United States, in the forefront should do anything they possibly can short of actually going to war with Russia. Now, what can they do? They're supplying arms, they're supplying artillery, they're doing whatever they could, obviously raising money to help people leave the country. They're helping with medical supplies, food supplies. We have to do all of that. We are a humanitarian country and we must do that. Because you know what? The cart went after the horse here. This could have been prevented. It could have been prevented. This administration, people, needs a lot of help. I'm going to sum it all up in one statement, not made by me, by somebody a lot smarter than me and somebody that's a lot more informed in government than I am. And who is that? It's Robert Gates. He's the former defense secretary for President Obama. And this was a statement that he made in his memoir. Remember, Biden was Obama's vice president, and this is what the defense secretary for Obama, Robert Gates, had to say in his memoir. Biden has been, quote, wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. When he was questioned about this, May of 2019, he stood by that statement. He said, no, Biden's wrong. Well, he's been wrong about this. He's wrong the way he handled Afghanistan. He's wrong the way he handled Russia. They saw weakness, they smelled blood, and now we have a war in the Ukraine because they knew Biden wasn't going to do anything. Sanctions, Putin was prepared for it. Terrible. So what do? We have a government right now that's doing things contrary to the will of the people. Contrary to the will of the people. All the polls are showing that. People are fed up with what's going on at the pumps. People are fed up with inflation. People are fed up with what's going on in our southern border. And now people are horrified about the war in Ukraine. And I have to say one thing, about being divisive. It's really insulting when everything becomes a racial issue. There are people hosting media outlets on mainstream media that are saying the only reason we are paying attention to Ukraine is because the country of Ukraine is occupied by white Christian people. And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be paying attention. I have the nerve to say something like that. Make this a racial issue. What's happening in Ukraine is a horrible humanitarian situation. Doesn't matter what color the people are, what their ethnic background is. It's a horrible situation. And people are concerned about it. People are dying there. It has nothing to do with race. It's because of what's going on. To make this a racial issue, it's terrible. And again, very divisive. And I just hope, I haven't heard people in government say that. It's people in the media. I just hope it doesn't get to that level. I really don't. But let me tell you something. Putin, obviously a bad guy. I mean, this guy, who knows what's wrong with him? People are saying that, mentally he's losing his facilities or something has happened to him. I don't know. I got to tell you this. I had a lot of Russian friends. I was in business with the Russians. They're smart people. They're very aggressive. And for me, they were great partners. We made a lot of money together. We were stealing tax money, but we made a lot of money together. I would love to be sitting down with Putin to negotiate something with him. I think I do a lot better than Biden would do. That's my opinion, but, who knows? Who am I to say that? But, it's terrible what's going on there. And it's terrible the way our government is handling not only the Ukraine issue, because they're really doing nothing. They're really doing nothing. They did nothing to stop the war. The sanctions are hurting, but they're not going to end the war. They're not. Putin's going to end the war. Now, if I had a crystal ball and I had to predict it, I would say this. The Ukrainians are doing a masterful job. They're showing the type of courageous people that they are and how much they love their homeland. But they're just outmanned. They're overpowered by Russia. And I think it's a matter of time before Russia does take over the capital city and installs the puppet government. And, I pray that President Zelensky gets out of there alive. I don't know. And maybe I'll be wrong. Listen, this is what I see that's going on. And maybe a week from now, the tide will turn and something else will happen. And Ukraine will come out of this better than they've already, than everybody already predicted. I don't know. I hope that that's the case. But it doesn't look that way. And what the West is doing, we're doing what we can. But it's not enough. This should have been prevented. It should have never come to a war in Ukraine. Maybe Ukraine should have been told straight out, you can't join NATO. That's it, not now. Situation is too risky. We don't need Russia being upset. Just stay where you are. We'll help you out. We'll do that, but stay where you are. Maybe that should have been this. Maybe we shouldn't have been buying oil from them from the very beginning and find out if we were able to export oil the way we were during the Trump years, we wouldn't be relying on them. Most of Western Europe wouldn't be relying on Russian oil either, but that's the way it is. And now what do we have our president doing? I don't know if you know this. He went hat in hand to Saudi Arabia to ask them to import oil to us. They didn't even take his phone call. It was all over the news. They wouldn't accept his call. He's going to Venezuela. They hate us there. Venezuela. He's going to Iran. So he's going to Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Iran, all countries that don't like the United States, rather than producing it here. Let me ask you a question for all those that are supportive of the Green New Deal. What's the difference where you produce the oil? As a matter of fact, we produce the oil a lot cleaner in the United States than they do anywhere else. So now we're taking dirty oil. How are we helping the environment there? It makes no sense. When people have to suffer the way they're suffering, we weren't ready to make this transition. We're just not ready. This is something that happens over a long period of time. You don't just cut the legs out of people so that they have to suffer because you want to support a different policy. People aren't for it anyway. This earth has been surviving on coal and natural gas and oil since the beginning of time. Not have to make such a drastic change right now. And don't think that change is not going to be expensive anyway. We have to gear up to do that also. None of this makes sense because we have an administration that is a mafia. This is a mafia democracy. Make no mistake about it, because they're operating under their own agenda and they're not expressing the will of the people. They're not. That's all I have to say. But I want to end it with this. We pray for the people in Ukraine. We hope that this war comes to an end soon. We don't want to see any more human tragedy. We hope Putin is put in his place and that this thing ends quickly. And, I'm going to be saying a lot more about it because there's too many things going on in this world that are not good, and in our country specifically, that we just need to talk about. Because if enough people are talking about it, if enough people are looking for a solution, we'll find one. You can't be complacent in today's world. And that's why I wrote the book. And when it comes out, I'll be saying a lot. And you know what? It's a bipartisan book. I hold Republicans responsible. I hold Democrats responsible. This is a bipartisan effort to hold our government officials accountable. That's it. So that's it for today. MichaelFranzese.com. Join the inner circle. It's growing in leaps and bounds, and I love what's going on there. I wish I can share the comments, how people are growing spiritually, emotionally, body, mind, and spirit. That's what we're dealing with. And we have so much content in there that people are enjoying. Franzese wine, not going to get into it now. I'm enjoying it. A lot of people are since we made the announcement. And really, that's it. So, how do I always leave you? The same way. Be safe. Be healthy. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. God bless all of you. And yes, I'll see you next time. Take care.